Welcome to video 4 in our Advent series. You're receiving this on Christmas Eve instead of the fourth Sunday of Advent, which was yesterday. And I want to read for you a short passage that I think hits on the theme of today. And the theme of today is sacred sadness. It is now the hour for you to wake from sleep, for our salvation is closer than when we first accepted the faith. The night is far spent, the day draws near. Let us cast off deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. There's something of a warrior stance with that passage, isn't there? And I think in many times in Christianity, phrases like that are taken as dualistic. This is right, this is wrong. This is good, this is bad. There can be great strength in seeing clearly the path of truth and goodness and compassion and acting on it. We all like that yang. It's a yang masculine quality that we all have within us. And it's a very strong part of our culture. But sometimes that black and white way of identifying things misses the deeper truth that we're meant to get to. Christmas is a great example of that. We're surrounded by music. The word joy is perhaps one of the biggest words of the season, at least that I see around. When you go into stores, there's Christmas joy. There are banners that say it. There are cards that shout it out. And it's meant to evoke within us the sense of joy at new life. If you're Christian and you celebrate the birth of Jesus, it's the joy of that birth and what it means. If you have a different path in spirituality, it taps the joy of earth coming to its fullness, of you coming into wholeness, of the new birth in the larger sense of the word, of all of us being God bearers and discovering that we have been born of divinity in our own lives. So it's a very rich concept. But what do we do with the amount of sadness that is at an all-time high in this season? How do we look at it? I was speaking with someone the other day, and it was an intimate conversation, and they were sharing about feeling disconnected from the season because of the great sadness they feel in some loss of people in their lives that loved the season of Christmas. And as this person was sharing, I had the inner realization that the sadness isn't a disconnection. It's actually another face of the connection. It is a face of love. Think about when you long for the coming home to someone you love. You long for the resolution of a joy that you used to have or that you're hoping to have in any area of your life. There is a coming home, a quickening within ourselves. And sometimes sadness is an impelling force to settle for nothing less than authentic, true connection. Sadness can come from the letting go of what no longer serves us because there is an unspoken and sometimes unrealized connection to that in which we're moving to. In one phrase, I like to think of this that exemplifies this is in Colossians. God will be all in all. And Teilhard de Chardin speaks of it so well that the Christ presence, the Alpha and the Omega, is a pulsing, ineffable quality in all of creation that is expanding creation outward, outward, outward as it comes home into itself, which is its transcendent self in form. Now, I know this sounds very heady. I'm going to give you an example in a moment because I want you to be able to come into this season because it's starting now and it goes up until February 2nd. In most authentic and full-blown traditions in the Christmas season, it goes up all the way to the presentation of the temple on February 2nd. It's the Festival of Lights. It is the bringing of Christ into the temple where the full realization and celebration of what this presence is recognized. The prophecies are fulfilled. And we're moving into that realization of the prophecy of our existence in God, in Source, being realized and celebrated. So I want to give you a very practical example of that. But I think that what I'd like to invite you to do is recognize places where you don't feel joy or hold humanity or creation in the way that it's grieving. Our earth grieves some of the rape and desolation that has happened. Humanity is grieving through all the divisions that still exist. Families longing for reunion grieve the separation that sometimes happens because of distance or beliefs. You may find a grieving. I know I myself have a loneliness. I feel a great fullness in my life, but in that fullness of feeling connection, there's tinges of loneliness because I've felt senses of things that I know I'm moving into that aren't yet in form yet. This sadness is all part of the connectedness of new birth. So I want to give you a practical example. I was on retreat with the Brahma Kumaris last year, and their image for the Source, for God, is a light burst. And we would spend long hours in meditation each morning. If you wanted, you could get up at 4. And you would sit before an image that was a light burst, and there was light shining from behind it that was artificially there, but it created a magnificent sense of what their image was for the unspeakable. And as I was sitting there in meditation, my eyes were closed, but visually I could feel behind my eyelids that image of that light burst. And at a certain point, I felt within me, my entire body was exploding with that light burst, that every cell was that light burst. And in that consolation of that experience of the light burst, there was one shaft of light that became more identified because the light burst didn't have a boundary around it. It became more like a cone-like, and it moved into a place of my heart that was not experiencing the consolation of that light burst. It was this small little remnant of me that was shrouded, if you will, in concealment. Darkness is a good metaphor, but I don't like it as a word, as sometimes it's pitted as not being light, and that's not what I mean. And as that moved there and I experienced a new refreshing consolation, a parable lit up for me. And it's a parable from the Gospels, a parable I hadn't thought of in 15 years. It's one that reportedly Jesus used in some of his teachings. And he speaks of a shepherd who is walking along the hillside with his sheep. And he's got 99 sheep. And he's walking, but he realizes that one, so he's meant to have 100. 100 are his, that one is missing. He leaves the 99 sheep and goes along the hillside and climbs over fences to find the one sheep. This, I believe, is something of the light coming into the places where we are sad, where we are not yet fully integrated into ourselves, where humanity is in birthing pains to come to its wholeness. There is much light already in our world. Creation is singing the praises of the divine. But not all creation is singing that praise within and outside of ourselves. How can we be found anew? I was found anew in that moment, and that parable gave a new light, that it wasn't that the one sheep was lost. It's that it would never be lost. It would always be sought. The places within you and I and me that are still coming into fullness will not be lost. How then can you and I give new birth to this belief in the world? How can we live it out with greater truth, authenticity, and compassion? How can we celebrate the reality that sacredness is joy and is sadness? Blessings, my friend. Merry, Merry Christmas. Mwah. I love you all. And as a special gift, tomorrow morning before dawn, I'll be rising and spending an hour in prayer and meditation for each of you, for all your intentions. So grateful to call you my friend.